The glare of a dozen television cameras was merciless, magnifying every bead of sweat on Viktor Andreevich's pallid face. He stood on a brightly lit stage, the logo of Omega Corporation emblazoned behind him, but the usual corporate sheen had been replaced by an ominous shadow. His tailored suit felt like a straitjacket, his carefully coiffed hair now disheveled, as if he'd been running through a storm. Flanking him, two stern-faced officials from the Federal Agency for Technological Oversight, FATO, read from a document with chilling precision. Viktor Andreevich, head of research and development, stands accused of systemic negligence, grand-scale embezzlement, and deliberate sabotage of the Phoenix complex, leading to its 3-decade dormancy, one official stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. The words struck Andreevich like physical blows. His jaw worked, trying to form a protest, but no sound escaped. His eyes, once sharp and arrogant, darted frantically, searching for an escape, a friendly face, anyone to dismiss this grotesque charade. But there was only the cold, unyielding gaze of the cameras and the murmurs of reporters, each flashbulb a tiny, condemning judgment. Behind him, through a panoramic window, the Phoenix complex hummed with an almost ethereal glow. Its once dormant towers, previously a testament to stagnation and failure, now throbbed with vibrant energy, a silent, powerful reproach. The very sight of it, active and magnificent, twisted the knife in Andreevich's gut. How? How could this be happening? He had built an empire on its ashes, meticulously ensuring its silence. The betrayal was absolute, the fall public, humiliating. A single, desperate cough escaped his lips, a sound swallowed by the relentless click of shutters and the official's droning voice. 18 months prior. The fluorescent hum of Omega Corporation's sprawling technical maintenance department was a familiar, almost comforting drone to Amara. At 30, she was a junior engineer, her desk crammed into a corner with the other overlooked, underpaid cogs in the vast corporate machine. Her official title was a generic, Technical Support Engineer 3, a bureaucratic label that belied a mind operating on a far more advanced frequency. Amara possessed an innate, almost intuitive understanding of complex systems, a gift inherited from her late father, Kirill Nikolaevich. He had been a brilliant, if unsung, engineer, whose last, disheartening years were spent toiling on the very project that now cast a long shadow over Omega, the Phoenix complex. The Phoenix. The name itself felt like a cruel joke, a mythical bird perpetually stuck in its ashes. 30 years ago, it had been hailed as Omega's crowning achievement, a revolutionary energy, or data processing/environmental remediation. The specific application varied depending on who you asked, complex, capable of reshaping industries. Now, it was a colossal monument to corporate failure, a silent, rusting behemoth tucked away in the least visited sector of the campus. The official line remained vague, unresolvable technical challenges. The unofficial whisper, however, was far more cynical, a money pit for R&D, a career graveyard for anyone foolish enough to believe in it. Amara knew it was neither. Her father had known. Amara often felt the weight of her father's legacy, not as a badge of honor, but as an invisible burden. The whispers followed her through the corridors, Kirill's daughter, the janitor's kid, the one who got in on a pity hire. Her education, her quiet competence, none of it seemed to matter. In the rigid hierarchy of Omega, her lineage defined her more than her intellect. She was an outsider, a ghost from a past era, connected to a project that was best forgotten. Yet, in the quiet solitude of her small apartment, poring over her father's meticulously hand-drawn schematics and cryptic notes, Amara knew the Phoenix was far from dead. She knew its secrets, its every intricate artery and circuit. Lording over the department, and indeed much of the corporate research initiatives, was Viktor Andreevich. A man whose presence seemed to expand to fill any room he entered, Andreevich possessed the kind of authority that came from a lifetime of careful networking and ruthless maneuvering, rather than genuine innovation. His suits were always immaculate, his smile a practiced, condescending curve. He was the quintessential corporate politician, a master of self-preservation and public relations. For years, he had skillfully redirected substantial budgets towards feasibility studies and restoration initiatives for the Phoenix, without ever producing a tangible result. The unsolvable problem was, for him, a perpetual cash cow, a convenient excuse for his department's lack of genuine progress. Andreevich's confidence was absolute, a fortress built on years of unchallenged power and a deep-seated belief in his own invulnerability. He embodied the very system Amara instinctively distrusted, a system that thrived on appearances, not substance, on control, not competence. The rhythmic click-clack of the 3D printer in the rapid prototyping lab was a testament to the latest corporate crisis. For weeks, Viktor Andreevich's elite R&D team had been grappling with a critical malfunction in a new generation optical array, an issue that threatened to derail a multi-million-dollar government contract. Panic was subtly starting to ripple through the upper echelons. Amara, assigned to a mundane diagnostic task on an unrelated, older system, worked quietly in the periphery, her focused gaze betraying no outward concern for the chaos unfolding around her. She listened, absorbed, as the R&D team presented their latest, predictably futile solutions to Andreevich. The problem, they explained with an air of sophisticated helplessness, was a complex algorithmic anomaly, a ghost in the machine. Viktor Andreevich, pacing dramatically, nodded gravely, offering platitudes about unprecedented technical hurdles and the cutting edge of engineering. His voice, smooth and resonant, was a performance designed to project authority even in the face of failure. Amara, however, saw a different story. Her eyes, sharper than any diagnostic software, had been scanning the flickering data streams on the lab's main display. Her father had taught her to listen to the machines, to trust the subtle patterns, the almost imperceptible whispers of an ailing system. What she saw wasn't an algorithmic ghost, but a glaring, elementary calibration error, a mistake so fundamental it would have been caught in any basic quality control. It was an oversight born of intellectual arrogance, a failure to look beyond the complex and consider the simple. Without a word, Amara walked over to a terminal connected to the optical array. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, a blur of practiced efficiency. In less than 3 minutes, she input a short sequence of commands, recalibrating the system. The diagnostic lights on the array immediately flashed green. The complex data stream stabilized. A faint, almost imperceptible hum of restored efficiency filled the room. Silence fell, thick and disbelieving. The R&D team stared, then one of them rushed forward to confirm the fix. It's working," he stammered, his voice laced with shock. "How? What did you do?" Viktor Andreevich's face, initially frozen in irritation at Amara's presumption, quickly rearranged itself into a tight, patronizing smile. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the R&D team leader's shoulder. "Excellent work, team," he announced, his voice booming with manufactured pride. "A testament to our collaborative spirit. Sometimes, a fresh pair of eyes, even from outside the core development, can spot a minor detail. A fine example of synergy, wouldn't you agree?" He glanced at Amara, a flicker of something unreadable, annoyance, perhaps a fleeting recognition of her skill, quickly masked by disdain. Amara simply assisted with a minor adjustment after our brilliant team had already isolated the core issue. "Good initiative, Amara, but next time, please follow protocol." He delivered the final sentence with a condescending smile, his tone implying she had overstepped, even in her success. His deputy and several loyal team members offered forced, appreciative chuckles, subtly reinforcing her low status. Later that week, during a high-stakes planning meeting for a new energy initiative, Amara cautiously raised her hand. "Sir, I've been reviewing the projected energy output models," she began, her voice soft but clear, "and based on some principles I've observed in the Phoenix's original schematics, I believe we could achieve a 15% efficiency increase by reconfiguring the power distribution matrix to a cascade resonance pattern." Andreevich, who had been listening with an air of bored tolerance, cut her off with a dismissive wave, a patronizing smile playing on his lips. Amara, he chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "We appreciate your enthusiasm. But we're dealing with cutting-edge technology here, not folk remedies. We don't need homespun theories based on a relic that's been dead for 3 decades. History, my dear, has definitively proven that the Phoenix is a failed project. Let's stick to proven methodologies, shall we?" A few executives around the table stifled snickers, casting glances at Amara, whose face remained impassive, though a subtle tightening around her eyes betrayed her quiet frustration. The memory of her father, Kirill Nikolaevich, flashed in her mind. She saw him, hunched over his workbench in their small apartment, surrounded by blueprints, his brow furrowed with a mixture of determination and weary disappointment. In his final years, he had been obsessed with the Phoenix, convinced he had found the key to its revival. He spoke of deliberate design flaws, of hidden mechanisms that were intentionally overlooked or misrepresented. But no one at Omega would listen. He was just a low-level engineer, dismissed as a senile idealist. He had died a quiet, heartbroken man, his brilliance unrecognized, his warnings ignored, never seeing the phoenix rise. The echo of Andreevich's dismissive laughter resonated with the systemic contempt that had ultimately crushed her father's spirit. But Amara was not her father. She had learned his lessons, but she would fight his battles with her own, colder, more strategic fire. The condescension from Viktor Andreevich and his sycophants had become a familiar dull ache, but the sting of disrespect resonated deeper today. It wasn't just her own expertise being dismissed, it was her father's legacy, his tireless, unheeded warnings, being swept away by the same tide of corporate arrogance. Amara returned to her small, meticulously organized apartment that evening, her mind churning with a quiet, dangerous resolve. The time for subtle suggestions and ignored proposals was over. She moved to a concealed compartment in her study, a space so discreet it had been missed by estate agents and even her own casual acquaintances. Inside lay her father's true inheritance, a collection of battered notebooks, encrypted hard drives, and intricate, hand-drawn schematics far more detailed than any official corporate record. These were not the public archives, but Kirill Nikolaevich's private, desperate attempts to document the truth. Amara had spent years meticulously deciphering them, learning her father's shorthand, understanding the unique logic of his genius. Tonight, her search had a new urgency. She sifted through the digital files, cross-referencing specific dates and technical anomalies her father had flagged. And then she found it. Not a single smoking gun, but a mosaic of calculated betrayals. There were encrypted communications logs, disguised as harmless interdepartmental memos, detailing specific modifications to critical Phoenix subsystems just weeks before its supposed failure. These weren't accidental flaws, they were precision strikes. Component failures, officially attributed to manufacturing defects, were actually the result of deliberate miscalibration or the installation of subtly inferior, untraceable parts. Supply chain records, buried deep in her father's meticulously indexed files, showed anomalous purchasing orders for obscure, high-margin components from a shell company, components that were later found to be perfectly compatible only with the Phoenix, and then mysteriously vanished. The picture that emerged was chillingly clear: the Phoenix hadn't simply broken down. It had been systematically and intentionally sabotaged, its potential suppressed. The unsolvable technical problems were a carefully constructed narrative, designed to mask a decades-long scheme orchestrated by individuals who stood to gain immensely from its dormancy. Perhaps it was to protect an existing, less efficient energy monopoly, or to divert massive research funds into corrupt channels. Her father had suspected it, had meticulously gathered fragments of evidence, but he lacked the power, the access, or perhaps the sheer audacity to expose it. Amara, however, possessed a different kind of power. Her outward calm was a mask for a mind that now moved with the cold precision of a master chess player. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about justice, about honoring her father's silenced voice, and about rectifying a colossal systemic wrong. She knew better than to confront Andreevich directly or to trust Omega's internal ethics committee, which was undoubtedly compromised. The local system was tainted. She activated her hidden mechanism. Using a highly secure, untraceable private network her father had built for his own paranoid yet prescient communications, Amara began compiling her dossier. It was a masterpiece of forensic engineering and meticulous documentation, decrypted logs, cross-referenced procurement records, detailed technical analyses, and even her father's original blueprints with his stark, annotated warnings. She didn't just present the problem, she presented the solution, laying out a clear, step-by-step methodology for diagnosing and repairing the sabotage, along with undeniable proof of its deliberate nature. Then, with a click that resonated with the weight of 3 decades of injustice, Amara anonymously uploaded the entire, damning package to the Federal Agency for Technological Oversight, FATO. FATO was the ultimate arbiter, an independent federal body with sweeping powers to investigate technological fraud, corporate negligence, and systemic corruption within strategically vital industries. It operated outside the corporate power structures, guided solely by facts and the national interest. Amara gave them everything they needed, without revealing anything about herself. She had set the wheels of a much larger, impartial machine in motion. Now, all she had to do was wait, observe, and continue her silent, meticulous work, like a spider patiently weaving its web. The arrival of the Federal Agency for Technological Oversight was not announced with fanfare, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible shift in the corporate atmosphere. One Monday morning, a sleek, unmarked black van pulled into Omega's parking lot, discharging a small team of individuals whose attire, sharp, understated suits, devoid of corporate branding, immediately set them apart. They moved with an efficient, almost military precision, heading directly for the executive suite. Within hours, the subtle tremors began. Executive assistants, usually privy to every whisper, found themselves suddenly excluded from meetings. Files that had gathered dust for years were abruptly requested. The coffee in the executive lounge tasted a little more bitter, the laughter a little more strained. Viktor Andreevich, ensconced in his opulent office overlooking the sprawling Omega campus, initially dismissed the Fado presence as a minor inconvenience. Another bureaucratic audit, he mused to his perpetually nodding deputy, Stanislav. Likely instigated by a disgruntled competitor, trying to stir up trouble. Nothing we haven't handled before. His tone was dismissive, laced with the casual arrogance of a man who believed himself untouchable. He had faced down similar threats for decades, deflecting, obfuscating, and subtly applying pressure until the pesky outsiders simply faded away. He orchestrated a charade of proactive cooperation. Meetings were scheduled, carefully vetted reports prepared, and a team of Omega's most skilled corporate lawyers was deployed to assist Fado, their real mandate being to control the flow of information and subtly obstruct any meaningful inquiry. Andreevich himself met with the lead Fado investigator, a woman named Agent Petrova, with a practiced smile and an outstretched hand. "Welcome, Agent Petrova. We at Omega pride ourselves on transparency. You'll find our operations entirely above board. How can we facilitate your routine review?" he purred, emphasizing the word routine with a dismissive flick of his wrist. Agent Petrova, however, was not easily swayed. Her eyes, cool and analytical, met his with an unnerving intensity. "Thank you, Mr. Andreevich. We appreciate your cooperation. Our mandate is comprehensive." She offered no further details, no hint of the true depth of their inquiry. This enigmatic brevity only served to fuel Andreevich's initial misjudgment. He saw it as typical bureaucratic obtuseness, a lack of understanding of real-world corporate complexities. "They're just going through the motions," he assured Stanislav later, fishing for a minor infraction to justify their budget. "We'll give them a few paper cuts and they'll be on their way." Meanwhile, Amara continued her work in the technical maintenance department, a picture of quiet, unassuming diligence. No one suspected her. She observed the Fado team from a distance, a ghost in the machine. Her face remained a mask of polite indifference, but inwardly, she was a predator, honing her strategy. She had not merely sent a report, she had embedded subtle, untraceable breadcrumbs within her initial submission, designed to guide Fado's investigation. These were not direct accusations, but rather meticulously crafted anomalies in seemingly innocuous data, coincidental discrepancies that, once investigated, would lead to deeper, more incriminating truths. In the dead of night, using an encrypted burner phone, she would send anonymous, one-line tips to a secure Fado Dropbox. Check the Q3 procurement logs, Project Chimera, subcontractor, Phoenix Solutions, cross-reference with facility maintenance for Phoenix section. Or, review archived email traffic from 2005 to 2007 between Andreevich and former head of finance, specifically regarding disposal of critical parts inventory. Each tip was carefully designed to appear as if it came from an insider with limited, fragmented knowledge, directing Fado toward specific, unexamined corners of Omega's vast, convoluted documentation. Amara was not just a catalyst, she was a silent, invisible conductor, orchestrating the unveiling of a truth decades in the making. The invisible war had begun, and Viktor Andreevich, blinded by his own hubris, still believed he was merely dealing with a minor skirmish. Agent Petrova, a woman whose calm demeanor belied a steel-trap mind, had no intention of a routine review. Her team, comprised of forensic accountants, cybersecurity specialists, and seasoned technical investigators, moved through Omega with the quiet efficiency of trained predators. Following the initial, highly detailed anonymous submission, a submission whose depth and specificity had immediately set off alarm bells within Fado, they began to systematically dismantle the corporate facade. Their first target was the labyrinthine financial records related to the Phoenix. Andreevich's department had consistently claimed exorbitant budgets for maintenance, upgrades, and feasibility studies on the dormant complex. But when Fado's forensic accountants delved into the specifics, the numbers refused to align. There were massive discrepancies in reporting, expenditures for specialized equipment that never appeared on inventory logs, large sums allocated for consultancy fees paid to obscure, newly formed companies, and recurring charges for emergency repairs to a system that, by all accounts, was completely offline. These anomalies, initially appearing as minor bookkeeping errors, began to coalesce into a pattern of deliberate misdirection. One of Amara's anonymous tips had subtly directed Fado to cross-reference procurement logs for Phoenix-related parts with the actual, physical inventory. What they found was damning. Millions had been spent over 3 decades on components that were either never delivered, or were of vastly inferior quality than specified, or, most egregiously, were duplicates of parts already present and functional within the Phoenix before its supposed collapse. "It's like they were buying spare tires for a car that was never going to drive," Agent Petrova remarked to her team, a flicker of cold anger in her eyes. Except they kept buying those tires, year after year. The cybersecurity specialists, meanwhile, were sifting through digital archives. They uncovered a trove of emails and internal memos that, while seemingly innocuous on the surface, revealed a culture of deliberate obfuscation. Conversations about the Phoenix often used euphemisms: the sleeping giant, the white elephant, our perpetual project. More disturbingly, they found evidence of systematic deletion of older, critical technical journals and engineering reports related to the complex, particularly from the years immediately preceding and following its shutdown. Key design schematics, once widely available, were now marked restricted access or had simply vanished from the official corporate servers. It was not just negligence, it was an active erasure of history. Viktor Andreevich, initially dismissive, began to show cracks in his polished facade. The Fado team wasn't leaving. They weren't just asking about current budgets, they were digging into 3 decades of financial and technical history. Calls from his well-placed contacts in the federal bureaucracy, usually so effective at making problems disappear, were now met with curt responses or outright stonewalling. "They're being unusually thorough," one senator's aide had mumbled, clearly unnerved. Andreevich's frustration morphed into barely concealed panic. He started holding impromptu briefings with his department heads, not to discuss work, but to subtly threaten them. "Any discrepancies found by these external auditors will be met with the full force of corporate discipline," he intoned, his voice low and menacing. "Loyalty, gentlemen, is paramount in these trying times." He pressed his subordinates to remember specific narratives, to verify the official versions of events, and to misplace any document that might contradict them. He paced his office, his perfectly tailored suit feeling suddenly tight, a growing knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. The casual paper cuts he had anticipated were starting to feel like deeper wounds, and the unseen hand guiding the knife was proving remarkably precise. The turning point came when Agent Petrova's team finally secured full, unfettered access to the Phoenix complex itself. After weeks of corporate stonewalling and unforeseen logistical delays, a direct federal mandate compelled Omega to unlock the gates. The massive, dormant structure loomed, a testament to decades of neglect, its metal skin peeling, its once pristine surfaces caked with dust and grime. Andreevich had hoped the sheer dilapidation would reinforce the narrative of irreversible failure. He was sorely mistaken. The Fado technical investigators, led by a veteran engineer named Dr. Anya Sharma, approached the Phoenix not as a ruin but as a crime scene. With Amara's meticulously prepared, anonymous blueprints and diagnostic notes as their guide, which had been accidentally discovered in a forgotten subdirectory by one of Fado's cyber specialists, following another of Amara's subtle prompts, they knew exactly where to look. They didn't waste time on superficial surveys. They went deep. What they found inside was appalling. Many of the unresolvable structural failures and catastrophic system breakdowns detailed in Omega's official reports were, in fact, elementary issues. A major coolant pump, cited as irreparably damaged, simply had a seized bearing, a routine maintenance task that had been deliberately ignored. A complex energy regulator, deemed beyond repair, was missing a single, easily replaceable sensor. More chillingly, critical safety overrides had been subtly rewired to bypass essential diagnostics, creating a false impression of system instability. These weren't accidents, they were surgical strikes, designed to cripple the system without leaving obvious traces for a casual observer. The smoking gun, however, lay in the primary control module. Amara's notes had painstakingly detailed the original, highly specific proprietary power conduits. Andreevich's team had consistently reported these as irreplaceable. Yet, when Fado investigators accessed the module, they found, instead of the original conduits, cheap, off-the-shelf replacements that were not only incompatible but had clearly been installed to cause system overload, not to repair it. These were the modified components her father had meticulously documented. The repairs had been designed to fail, to ensure the Phoenix remained dormant. This wasn't a malfunction, Dr. Sharma stated grimly to Agent Petrova, holding up a corroded, ill-fitting connector. This was a professional, deliberate act of sabotage, repeated over years. Every so-called repair after the initial shutdown was designed to prevent it from ever working again, while looking like a genuine, if unsuccessful, attempt. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about the Phoenix. The scale of the deceit meant that multiple high-level individuals had to be involved, not just in the initial sabotage, but in the decades-long cover-up. The millions in Phoenix Project funding hadn't gone into repairs, it had been siphoned off, funneled through the same shell companies and consultancy fees Fado's financial team had already flagged. The investigation was rapidly expanding beyond a simple case of corporate fraud. It was a conspiracy, deeply entrenched within Omega and perhaps reaching beyond its walls. Viktor Andreevich, who had scoffed at the routine audit, now felt the walls closing in. The polite, distant demeanor of Agent Petrova had hardened into an unyielding resolve. His carefully crafted network of loyalty and fear began to fray. Subordinates, now facing federal penalties, started to waver, their fear of Andreevich slowly being eclipsed by the very real threat of prison. Rumors of his impending downfall began to circulate, not just within his department, but throughout the entire corporate structure. The unsolvable problem had become an undeniable indictment, threatening to bring down not just Andreevich, but an entire ecosystem of corruption that had thrived in the Phoenix's long, profitable shadow. With the evidence of deliberate sabotage now undeniable, Viktor Andreevich descended into a state of barely controlled panic. His once impenetrable arrogance began to crack, replaced by a desperate, flailing scramble to regain control. He ordered his remaining loyalists to destroy any incriminating documents, fabricating alibis, and even attempting to plant false evidence in other departments to divert Fado's attention. He put immense pressure on anyone he suspected might cooperate with the investigators, using thinly veiled threats about their careers, families, and future prospects. One junior engineer, who had inadvertently stumbled upon some old, suspicious maintenance logs, found himself abruptly transferred to a remote, dead-end outpost in a subsidiary company, his protests falling on deaf ears. The focus of Andreevich's fury, though, subtly shifted towards Amara. He couldn't pinpoint why, but something about her quiet composure, her almost unnerving lack of reaction to the escalating chaos, grated on him. He remembered her earlier, dismissed suggestions about the Phoenix. Could she be involved? It was a wild, paranoid thought, but it gnawed at him. He orchestrated a series of performance reviews for Amara, fabricating minor infractions, accusing her of negligence, and docking her pay. During one such meeting, he leaned across his polished desk, his voice a venomous whisper, "You know, Amara, some people just aren't cut out for this environment. Perhaps a change of scenery, away from the complexities of Omega, would be beneficial for everyone involved. Especially for those who dabble in matters beyond their pay grade." He watched for a reaction, for fear, for any sign of weakness. But Amara merely met his gaze with an impassive, almost vacant expression, nodding faintly as if acknowledging a particularly dull instruction, then returned to her desk, her outwardly serene demeanor a perfect shield against his psychological assault. She was a stone in his path, immovable and utterly unreadable. Unknown to Andreevich, Amara's unwavering calm was fueled by a quiet satisfaction. Her anonymous tips continued, more precise and targeted than ever, guiding Fado through Omega's labyrinthine corporate structure. One such tip, disguised as a casual mention in a public forum about archived data integrity, led Fado's cybersecurity team to an old, rarely accessed server room, deep within the oldest wing of the Omega campus. Inside, behind a dusty, forgotten panel, they discovered a series of encrypted storage devices. These were the true crown jewels of Amara's hidden mechanism, Kirill Nikolievich's personal archives. For years, her father had meticulously documented his work, his suspicions, and his theories about the Phoenix's demise. The files contained not just technical drawings and detailed repair procedures that completely contradicted Omega's official reports, but also personal diaries filled with his frustration, his attempts to warn superiors, and his growing conviction of a deliberate conspiracy. He had even recorded surreptitious audio conversations with sympathetic colleagues, capturing snippets of damning dialogue about managing expectations and containing the Phoenix narrative. Agent Petrova and Dr. Sharma pored over the findings. Kirill Nikolievich's insights, corroborated by the physical evidence found within the Phoenix and the financial irregularities, painted a complete, damning picture. It wasn't just Andreevich. The archives revealed a web of complicity involving multiple senior executives, both current and retired, who had actively participated in the sabotage, covered it up, and profited from the resulting redirection of funds. The scale of the corruption was breathtaking, far exceeding the initial scope of Fado's investigation. Omega Corporation, a pillar of technological innovation, had been rotting from within for 3 decades, a private fiefdom for a select few who had sacrificed progress for personal gain. The local corporate structure, once seemingly invulnerable, was now teetering on the brink of catastrophic collapse, its foundations eroded by the silent, relentless work of a single, underestimated engineer's daughter. The air in the grand auditorium of the Federal Agency for Technological Oversight headquarters was electric, thick with anticipation and the hushed whispers of dozens of journalists. A massive screen dominated the stage, displaying the Fado logo. Viktor Andreevich, his face a mask of strained composure, sat at a long table, flanked by a phalanx of high-priced corporate lawyers from Omega. They had tried every legal maneuver, every delay tactic, but Fado's ironclad case, built on months of relentless investigation, had forced this public reckoning. Andreevich still clung to a sliver of hope, believing his carefully constructed narrative of unforeseen technical challenges and heroic, albeit unsuccessful, repair efforts would prevail. He underestimated the meticulousness of the higher system. Agent Petrova stepped to the podium, her voice clear and resonant. Today, the Federal Agency for Technological Oversight presents its findings regarding the Omega Corporation's Phoenix complex. She began to systematically outline the financial fraud, the systemic negligence, and the overwhelming evidence of deliberate sabotage that had plagued the Phoenix for 30 years. As she spoke, charts and graphs appeared on the large screen, illustrating the massive siphoning of funds, the falsified reports, and the deliberate installation of faulty components. Andreevich's lawyers fidgeted, their confident expressions slowly dissolving into grim concern. When Agent Petrova reached the point of the critical internal systems, she paused. Mr. Andreevich and his team have consistently maintained that the Phoenix suffered from insurmountable technical flaws, rendering it permanently inoperable. She then played an audio recording, a snippet from one of Kirill Nikolievich's hidden diaries, where his voice, weary but clear, described in precise detail the exact, easily rectifiable modifications needed to restore the Phoenix. Andreevich's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear crossing his face. This was not the narrative he controlled. However, Agent Petrova continued, her gaze sweeping across the room, facts speak louder than fabricated reports. And some facts are best shown. At that moment, the stage lights dimmed slightly, and the massive screen behind her dissolved into a live video feed. The camera zoomed in on a majestic, towering structure, bathed in a soft, internal glow, the Phoenix complex. Its once dead core throbbed with vibrant energy, intricate mechanisms whirring with powerful, controlled precision. The sound, a deep, resonant hum, filled the auditorium, amplified through the speakers. On the screen, a figure in a clean, functional lab coat, her hair neatly tied back, moved with confident purpose around the operational core. It was Amara. With a final, expert adjustment to a gleaming panel, she stepped back, her face illuminated by the Phoenix's reawakened energy. A low, sustained tone filled the auditorium, the unmistakable sound of the Phoenix achieving optimal operational parameters. It was fully functional, running perfectly. The effect was devastating. Andreevich gasped, a strangled sound escaping his throat. He stared at the screen, his face a grotesque mask of horror and disbelief, mirroring the exact moment depicted in the prologue. The Phoenix, his perpetual golden goose, his unassailable proof of an unsolvable problem, was alive. His entire empire of lies crumbled before his eyes, publicly and irrevocably. And now, Agent Petrova said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, we will hear from the engineer who, using the rediscovered work of her father, Kirill Nikolievich, spearheaded the true restoration of the Phoenix complex. The auditorium doors opened, and Amara walked calmly onto the stage, not as a victim, but as the quiet architect of justice. She carried a stack of well-worn notebooks, her father's diaries, now irrefutable evidence. She stood tall, her gaze steady, meeting Viktor Andreevich's horrified eyes. The circle was complete. The quiet daughter of the ignored engineer had not just revived an engine, she had activated a higher, impartial justice. The collective gasp from the journalists was almost deafening as Amara took her place at the podium, a quiet, resolute figure against the backdrop of the now glowing phoenix on the screen. Viktor Andreevich's face was a tableau of utter devastation, his jaw slack, his eyes wide and unfocused, fixed on the image of the revitalized complex. His carefully constructed world of impunity had just imploded, live on national television. Amara, however, showed no overt triumph. Her voice, calm and clear, filled the room. My father, Kirill Nikolaevich, dedicated his life to the Phoenix. He understood its intricacies, and he understood the systemic failures that led to its dormancy. She then, with an almost academic precision, began to present the irrefutable evidence, the meticulously documented design alterations, the deliberately installed faulty components, the falsified repair logs, and the compelling financial trails that proved an intentional, decades-long scheme of sabotage and embezzlement. Each piece of evidence she presented, supported by visual aids and direct cross-references to Fado's findings, hammered another nail into Andreevich's coffin. She displayed excerpts from her father's diaries, read out specific dates and times of ignored warnings, and even played short, crystal-clear audio snippets of Andreevich himself, recorded years ago, casually dismissing concerns about the Phoenix's future. The last remnants of Andreevich's composure shattered. He lunged forward, a guttural cry escaping his lips. This is a fabrication. Lies. She's nothing but a technician's daughter. But before he could reach the podium, two burly Fado security officers, who had been strategically positioned, moved swiftly to intercept him. His struggles were pathetic, the desperate thrashing of a man utterly unaccustomed to facing consequences. Viktor Andreevich, Agent Petrova interjected, her voice firm and authoritative as the security officers restrained him. You are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, and technological sabotage, with immediate effect. She then turned to the other senior Omega executive seated near him, her gaze piercing. Similar charges are being prepared for several other high-ranking individuals whose complicity in this extensive network of corruption has been thoroughly documented. The auditorium erupted into a cacophony of camera flashes and urgent shouts from reporters. Andreevich, his face contorted in a silent scream of rage and disbelief, was led away, his image captured in a dozen frames of absolute public humiliation. His carefully constructed life, built on lies and the suppression of truth, had crumbled in spectacular fashion. The ensuing weeks saw a cascade of arrests. Andreevich's deputy, Stanislav, and several other implicated executives were apprehended as the full scale of their decades-long conspiracy was laid bare. Subsequent court proceedings were swift and decisive. The sheer volume and meticulousness of the evidence, largely thanks to Kirill Nikolaevich's foresight and Amara's strategic execution, left no room for doubt. Viktor Andreevich received a maximum sentence for his crimes, along with the full confiscation of his ill-gotten assets. His co-conspirators faced similar fates, their careers ruined, their reputations irrevocably tarnished, and their freedom gone. Omega Corporation, under intense public and federal scrutiny, was forced to pay unprecedented fines, facing a complete restructuring of its leadership. Amara watched the news reports from her quiet apartment, a subtle sense of profound satisfaction settling over her. There was no elation, no celebratory cheer. Her motivation had never been about personal glory or vengeance, but about truth, about justice for her father, and about restoring integrity to a system that had become deeply corrupted. She felt a deep, quiet catharsis, the kind that comes from righting a decades-old wrong. The higher system had worked, meticulously dismantling the localized web of power and deceit, proving that even the most entrenched corruption could not withstand the unyielding force of objective truth and persistent, strategic action. The dust of the public scandal slowly began to settle, leaving Omega Corporation in a state of profound upheaval. With Viktor Andreevich and his network of corrupt executives purged, a new interim leadership, under the strict oversight of Fado, embarked on an unprecedented corporate overhaul. The massive fines levied against Omega were painful, but the revitalized Phoenix, now humming with efficient power, offered a glimmer of hope for a future built on integrity. Amara, no longer the quiet junior engineer in the maintenance department, found herself in a position of unexpected, yet deserved, influence. She politely declined offers of a lavish executive salary or a public relations tour. Her ambition remained singular, to ensure that what happened to the Phoenix, and to her father, could never happen again. The new CEO, a pragmatic, forward-thinking leader appointed by the Fado Oversight Committee, recognized her unique value. Amara was appointed head of a newly created, independent, Integrity and Innovation Division, directly answerable to the board and FATO, with a mandate to implement systemic changes. Her first initiative was the establishment of transparent, decentralized project funding, designed to eliminate single points of failure and prevent the kind of budget siphoning that had plagued the Phoenix. She championed the creation of an open-source engineering archive, digitizing and making accessible all project documentation, including historical designs and maintenance logs, to prevent future intentional suppression of critical information. More importantly, Amara initiated a mentorship program for young, talented engineers, specifically designed to identify and nurture innovative ideas, ensuring that their voices would be heard and their contributions valued, regardless of their background or corporate standing. She wanted to build a culture where competence and ethics were paramount, not connections or status. The Phoenix Complex, once a symbol of monumental failure and hidden corruption, was fully integrated into Omega's operations, its revolutionary capabilities finally realized. It became a powerful icon, not just of technological advancement, but of corporate redemption. Its gleaming towers stood as a testament to the fact that truth, however deeply buried, could always rise. Amara would often visit the Phoenix in the evenings, walking among its now operational systems. The hum of its machinery was a soothing symphony, a stark contrast to the silence of its 3-decade slumber. She would often carry one of her father's worn notebooks, tracing his elegant script, a faint, contented smile on her lips. His dream, his warnings, his unyielding belief in the potential of the Phoenix, had finally come to fruition. He had been right all along. The story of the Phoenix, and of Amara's quiet triumph, resonated far beyond Omega. It became a cautionary tale for corporations everywhere, a testament to the power of systemic oversight and the indomitable spirit of an individual committed to justice. For Amara, there was no grand celebration, no overwhelming sense of personal glory. Her satisfaction was deeper, more profound, the restoration of truth, the vindication of her father's honor, and the forging of a path toward a more just and transparent future. She had not only revived a forgotten engine, she had revitalized the very principles of integrity and meritocracy within a broken system, proving that even the most deeply entrenched structures of deceit could be shattered by the quiet, unwavering resolve of truth.